creating a pretty structured interview so that you take away biases when you're interviewing the candidate. You took ownership and you looked at what you did and how you could do it differently, because that's how you can tell if if it's going to be a solid recruiter, or if you have the right person in the right seat. It's the person who's saying, how can I do this differently, and not looking at only the external circumstances, but like, how can I take this and what did I do wrong and what can I change?
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast, where I bring in the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth and recruiting to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, I have a great one today. My guest on the podcast is Diane Prince. She started her first niche staffing agency in her house, grew it to multiple 8 figures, and sold it to a public company for a whopping $28 million. Boom. Since then, she has co-founded, built, and exited several staffing and recruiting companies and helped multiple entrepreneurs build their agencies. And today, I'm going to use this time to help her build mine. We're going to dig into her recruiting journey, lessons learned, and what she's up to now, and so much more. Diane Prince, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Adam. So excited to be here with you.
Howdy. I am thrilled to have you here. And we were talking offline before we started recruiting, before I started recording. Welcome to my life. A life of recruiting. That's going to be the name of my autobiography, A Life of Recruiting and Recording. No, I could do better than that. We could definitely workshop that. But Diane has an incredible story and journey that we're going to unpack here today. And whenever I talk to folks that have been in the industry for a long time, I'm always curious to learn, how did you get into it? Did you fall into recruiting? I mean, there's very few folks that either, came out of, high school or college and said, I want to be a recruiter when I grow up. How did you get into it, Diane?
Well, I got into it because I wanted to build a business. So I was married to my co-founder then, and we wanted to build a business that we could scale and exit. So for us, it wasn't really about, we weren't recruiters. We didn't have that experience. I had temped. I mean, that was literally my experience. I temped in college and grad school, but we wanted to, we were in our 20s, and we said, what if we could do something and build it so that we could sell it and then retire in our 30s? And then we backtracked from there and started thinking of ideas, and temp staffing was a really good idea.
Temp staffing. I mean, it's so interesting too. And we're going to kind of go back and, I'm going to try not to throw dates out there, but you've been in this business long before LinkedIn, long before, people were using the modern internet for searching and sorting and sourcing. What was it like back then? I tell stories of people that I actually remember. I'm not that young. I'm no spring chicken. I remember my early jobs physically sending resumes. But what was it like back then? Like, was it really just opening the mail and getting resumes and sorting them and using this thing we call a phone to actually talk to people?
Pagers and faxes too.
Fax machines. Don't forget fax machines and beepers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, actually,
Smoke
my first temp assignment, I didn't know how to use a fax machine, and the office manager, I overheard her say to someone else, "Remind me never to hire a temp again." Because it was so cutting edge, right? Actually, that's how I first started. Is I started putting ads in the LA Times. So we would do back then, like it was $120. A 3-line ad was $120 for Sunday ads. And so we keep it super short. I specialized in title insurance. So it was like a really short ad. And we'd say call call Monday, work Tuesday. So it was like call MO, work.
That's a strong call to action.
Yeah. People would have called and asked for Mo, though. It was really fun.
Can I speak to Mo, please? You mean Monday?
So I rented a PO box near my work, and we had, it had to put your address so they could send you the resume. Every single day at lunch, I checked. The first day I got a resume, I was so excited. I cried. I could not believe someone actually sent me a resume, and I quit my job that next day.
That is incredible. When you look back on it now from like a tech perspective, but and you level it up, like, are there any of those kind of like old school techniques that just reign tried and true that folks are just not using these days? Let's talk tech for a moment, because now it's so easy. I mean, listen, the proliferation of AI has made it in my regards, certain elements easier and more efficient from an organizational standpoint, from certain sourcing areas. But I think it's made a lot of modern recruiters really lazy because they're not learning the true art
Mhm.
and science of recruiting.
Yes, yes. And I believe that so older people can learn so much from tech and the younger generation and vice versa. And I think it is a pretty deadly combination, like having years of experience and then also staying up to date and relevant in tech is just that is a really good combination. But um, it was okay. Lost art. When I'll pick one thing, and that's reference checking, because that's how like literally I got so much business, and still to this day I get business from reference checking. So it just and it's a reference check is not doesn't have to be at the end, and it's making connections. And when you have a solid candidate, you follow the dots
Mm-hmm.
and see where what can you get, what can you glean from that, what relationships can you build upon that one relationship that you have.
Well, yeah, there's two parts of that too. The art of the reference check too, because when you're checking with that company, you're building that relationship, and it's a warm call, it's a warm lead because you're
Yes.
not calling reaching out for business. You're establishing a relationship with a hiring manager. You know, if you're calling for a reference check, that you're hiring somebody, so you're successful, you're good at what you're doing, and that
Yeah.
opens up so many doors to the follow up. But then the other thing is obviously the Trojan horse. The new candidate that you're placing, depending on their level, is going to be an advocate for you. Diane hired Adam. Adam starts at a new company. Adam's in charge of hiring. Who do you think he's going to call? Aside from Ghostbusters, he's going to call Diane, right? We're going to call Diane because that's who we need. So I want to go back to the first company. First of all, what was that like starting a relationship, starting a business with your partner?
Well, we were super driven, so I really believe that. And when I work with people, I we do a visioning exercise the first thing, because I really believe to have that vision in mind and what you want to do and what you want to build. So we were both I mean, it ended up like we were really good business partners, but for a few reasons. But we were both so driven, and I believe in your business, everybody has to have a really clear idea. Like everybody being part of your business has to be a vehicle to get them to what they want and their personal vision and out of life. So the two of us, like we brought people on who had different visions than us, but
Right.
we were both
Hmm.
so driven that I mean, it was really fun.
How did you? I mean, was it business talk all the time? Like when you came home, dinner, around weekends? Like, were you able to separate that? Like, think about what advice you would give other folks who are in a business relationship with their partner.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a bit different. I mean, we were both like super high energy and driven, and we had three kids. Well, during this time too, we built a couple of homes. I mean, we threw in a lot of crazy stuff in the mix, and we did talk about business almost all the time. So, I think, what advice would I give? I mean, I think like knowing we were able to though separate, like if we had business arguments, we did not carry those through
Mm.
into our personal life.
So
Personal
you tried to
argument, we
really have
went,
those boundaries, right? You
yeah,
truly tried to establish boundaries. That's important.
yes, and also being able to challenge each other and to push back. And another thing that made us really work well is that we played off of each other's strengths, and we never set it up like this was most of our clients didn't know we were married. I mean, we acted like we
Mm.
were this big company. And sometimes there were certain candidates or clients who didn't like me. There were some that didn't like him. We really tried to like take our egos
That's
out of
it's
it. And we
it's
like,
actually a
oh,
good tactic.
one more thing I will say that was key is that we had a rule: if either one of us was about to go see client like client facing, if we were going to be client facing, we were not allowed to give the other person any deliver any bad news before they went out.
Well, that's good because you're setting intentions. You want to have so what was like you had this started this company. What was one of those early lessons learned the hard way? Maybe it's something you assumed like was going to be smooth. Maybe you thought it was the way to do something,
Oh
and then
yeah.
you got that first punch in the face.
Well, I mean, we did temp staffing, so which can
Oh,
be pretty
crazy stories.
complicated, and we
Yeah.
didn't have an employer of record or anything. We just did it ourselves. And I mean, first slap in the like, I didn't even know what workers' comp was, So like, we had to like literally was like building the plane on the way down. Like, we did not know any, all the and then also like we were like, okay, we just set up markups or whatever, and then we figured out we had no idea like the math or anything. So that
Mhm.
was something that we definitely figured out
I
along
mean,
the way.
the math is critical, and we're gonna get into agency ownership in a little bit, really understanding margins and profitability and overhead and all that kind of stuff too. But I want to kind of get back to really I mean, so I've been a recruiter for nine years. August will be, I mean, July 6th will be 9 years. And the first thing I learned before I did one thing, I had a great mentor. I talk about Tom all the time. He really broke down for me the art and science of recruiting. And
Mm.
science, we could talk about sourcing and all the other tactics that we use, but I want to talk about the art. And the thing he taught me first was motivation, understanding a candidate's motivation, understanding a client's motivation. So let's talk about candidates motivation for a little bit. How do you kind of approach understanding a candidate's motivation? How do you kind of unpack that to really see where their intentions lie?
Yeah, I think, well, listening, I mean, active listening is a skill that will help you in any part of your life. But and asking, I mean, and I think also like creating a pretty structured interview so that you take away biases when you're interviewing the
Mm,
candidate, but just, being as open, and just, when in doubt, I mean, just be honest, and just ask them like, what are your career goals? What do you want? Find out, because also, and not, yeah, it's a cliche, but be relationship driven and not transactional, so that
always.
you're their person for their career.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one too. I mean, the part that I would learn also is around what is their motivation for changing jobs? Because that's always critical when you're getting to the close, right? When you're getting,
Yeah.
because that's the hardest part, right? Like, and I don't think most people realize how many steps go into. And if we're talking full time, perm search here,
Hmm.
it is temp's a little bit different beast, right? Because
Hmm.
these are folks that are a little bit more transactional. I mean, listen, there's long term and short term, perm gigs, and there's different duration to it. But when you're talking perm, um, aside from your relationship, aside from a major, your job is one of the most important decisions of your life, right?
Yes.
You're deciding, where I'm going to work, where I'm going to plant my roots. I'm going to have this on my resume. So understanding a candidate's motivation, why they want to leave. Is it money driven? Now, if it's money driven, I know where to focus at the finish line. If I know they're
Mhm.
fine in their company, they're happy, but they need to make more money for X, Y, and Z reasons, I know that's what we're driving home with. I know that's going to be their sticking points, right? Versus opportunity, where some folks be like, hey, listen, I'm financially good. I'm okay with, 10, 12% raise, whatever it is, yada, yada. But it's about the opportunity. That's where I'm going to focus as a recruiter.
Mm.
That's where I'm going to focus the conversation. That's where I'm going to focus making sure. And here's another thing I learned, and I don't mean to be in my soapbox here. I don't normally do this, but it's important. Closing at every conversation with a candidate and a client one way or another. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I would add it. I love that. I'm curious about that too, how you do the closing at every conversation. I would add at the beginning, the first conversation, finding out what's wrong with their current role. And then I also ask them like, so besides understanding the motivation, what have they done to solve that
Mm,
problem currently at their current position? Because we all know about the counter offers, and that and you never, you can protect yourself so that it happens a lot less in the final stages. But finding out, like, I'll ask them like, what kind of coach them through trying to
yeah.
resolve, can they get better money where they're at, are there other opportunities where they're at, and really try to cover all those bases. And then also ask them like, when you get your next role, how do you plan on giving notice? So you really
Mm.
give that picture in their head, so that they understand actually what the gravity is, or the serious decision that they're making.
Yeah, and then the counteroffer is an interesting one because that's one of those X factors that are I would say generally speaking out of our control. But what can we do to kind of mitigate it? And it's coaching them early on. Like once I kind of get to mid stage, past a couple of rounds, I say, all right, hey Diane, this is getting pretty serious. Let's have a real chat for a moment. When I talked before about closing them at every spot, this is a perfect time. Let's say we're halfway through the process. Diane, I know you said in our conversation you're looking for $100,000. Let's pretend right now there's an offer on the table, and that offer is $100,000. Are you going to take that today, or are we going to be in a position where A, you might be asking them for more money, and then I could start to kind of seed that a little bit to see if there's a wiggle room, and B, what if your current company comes back to you when you accept this offer and you go to them to resign and they say, hey, Diane, we're going to offer you $120,000. Would you take that money to be comfortable right now on the spot? Or is this opportunity you see the long-term potential? And at least kind of get their gut instinct on that so you could figure out how to coach around that and manage as a recruiter.
Yeah.
Right? There's elements to that. And when I say always be closing, it's a soft close. How are we feeling about this? How are we looking? Do you have any like red flags, concerns?
Mm-hmm.
What outstanding questions do you think at this point we still need to work through with the hiring team for you to make an informed decision? Because so
Yeah.
many candidates, there's so much diligence that a candidate needs to do and own versus a client, right?
Yeah.
This is your decision. Yes, it's their decision to make you the offer, but it's your decision to accept it.
Yeah. One of the agencies I worked with, they had one of their core values was be the shepherd, and I
Hmm.
love that because it's really like shepherding the candidates and the clients, but shepherding them through the process to get to the close.
Yeah, shepherding's a good one, and I like to use shepherd or Sherpa. You know, they're very very kind of similar words. Like I'm your career Sherpa.
Hmm.
We're gonna get you through that. So you get to the point, you build up this incredible company. Was it a easy decision to sell? Was there like a number out there, or was it an intentional? We're gonna sell this because that was a plan all along. And what was that process like?
Well, it was the plan all along, but it was funny. Like in our first year, my husband was like, if someone offered us $100,000, I'd take it right now." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?
Get
No,
out,
like, no."
punch out, Maverick.
But so, because there were those moments, right, when it was really stressful and we just wanted to get out. And then, so I think it was like kind of a combination of that because we did have a set of advisors, one who was an investment banker. He knew our goal. So we met with him even when we were just starting out. Every quarter, we
Right.
sat with him and said, "What are the next steps? What should we do next?" And then at a certain point, we all agreed we were at a good point where, I mean, we could have kept on building. And I mean, a lot of people that started when we did are, making hundreds of millions of dollars now, because they kept going, but that just wasn't what we wanted to do.
So this life isn't for everybody, and not every recruiter is meant to go out on their own. And we're talking specifically about agency recruiters. So what does that DNA look like of someone who really has the ability to go out and be successful as an agency owner and build a company around recruiting?
Well, you have to have, I mean, sort of an iron stomach for this, and then be be really driven. I mean, it is not for everyone. Look, like my dad was always an advisor for us, and he was on the board. He was at a corporate job his entire career, and he was like, I could
Mm,
never have done this, but was like always supportive and proud that I could. I think it's just I really do think it's a certain drive, and it's not so much about the skill set, like I'm a recruiter so I'm going to start this agency. It's more about, again, it all goes back to that vision and how it's really a decision on how you want to choose to spend your days and live your life. So I mean, I always feel like if you're doing this work anyway, do it, create something for yourself. And I'm motivated by money, and it's like that is the
yeah.
way to make a lot of money is to have your own business and create recurring revenue and scale it.
Right. I mean, people think that this is easy, and it's not. And there's
Mm-mm.
overhead and there's expenses to it as well too. When it comes down to margins, it really comes down to understanding your numbers. Like,
Mhm.
yes, the difference between myself working for myself versus an agency is I don't have to give anything to the house. I don't have to
Yeah.
get, and that was kind of the reason why I went on my own. My wife said to me one day, she's like, because I was unhappy at the agency I was at, she's like, "What are they giving you for half of your commission? What are they giving you? You're
Mm,
responsible for driving your business. You're responsible for filling the roles. What are they giving you? A LinkedIn recruiter seat, an office to work at, a laptop? I mean, those are all easily replaceable things.
great question.
If you sign an NDA and like non-compete and you're not going to bring that business with you, do you have enough confidence in yourself to take those skills and go out there and get new business? But why do you think so many folks kind of fail or drop out of this?
You know, well, one thing is if they're not really in it to be an entrepreneur, and
Mm.
then they get a job offer. It's like that's like
Yeah,
with tech startups
the
too.
fail safe, right? Like, I'm
Yeah,
just going to go back
right.
to
I mean, if
big.
you're really hireable, then you get offers. And if you're really not super driven and if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, that can be really easy. I mean, that's in the tech world too, and startups. If it's a problem if people are too hireable, that's why it's so important to make sure that everybody on your team has a really specific reason to being there. Because I can tell you, like, we had gnarly moments where we had people who I know wanted to leave, and I found out this later, but they were tied to it. They were tied to the end result, so they
Mm.
stayed.
How did you learn to be a good people leader?
Oh gosh, I it took a lot of time, and I think I really sucked at it for a really long time. And I would say probably even like I've always been really driven and led in that way and led by example, but I was not a good manager until even like fairly recently,
Hmm.
like after building and selling companies. And that was something I look back in retrospect and realized things that I could have done differently, or things that I work with my clients now and like helping them um, to do that. And I think like one thing is understanding what your own issues are, because all of our
Oh,
personal issues,
self-awareness.
yeah, and we
Hmm.
bring it to work. We just do. So it's really like doing a lot of self work too, and resolving those issues, or being aware of them and having tools to deal with them in your business.
It comes down to the tools, and you talk a lot about. I mean, this is your bag. That I want to break down the 5-step framework to building a big agency, and we could keep it relatively high level. And I just want to, if you could unpack those pillars for us, let's kind of get into it a little bit on what that framework looks like.
Yeah, yeah. So the first is vision. So really knowing, getting clarity on what you want to do and what you want to build and accomplish, and you have to know too that your business model is going to get you there, right? So that's incredibly important. You need to have so business model is the second thing. So knowing that you have, so it's vision and then business model, knowing that your business model aligns with what you want to do. Okay. Then also team. You have to have a stellar team. Depending, like some people are happy, some people want to be a solopreneur.
Hmm.
They don't want a team. That's fine. And that again goes back to aligning your vision.
Yeah, your vision.
Yeah. If your vision is to build a multi-million dollar business that you can exit, then you are going to need a team. So it's building that stellar team. Key things are everybody has to have a really solid reason to being there, and you just have to have excellent people. A lot of times people come to me with mediocre teams. That's going to get mediocre results.
Well,
It
it's
just,
also your reputation. If you can't deliver to your clients, they're not going to want to work with you. If people can listen, no one's ever going to work as hard or care much about your business as you. But you want people that do work hard and are good recruiters and deliver because they represent your brand. They are your brand.
yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's who you are, and it can be easy for founders to keep mediocre people. It can be confusing um, what kind of consequences to have if they're not meeting their metrics. There's a lot of things, but that's how your culture is built on your people as well. And if you're tolerating underperformers, everybody sees it.
That's an important point, and I've been seeing that a lot too. It's tolerating underperformance because you're telling everyone in the company it's okay to freaking mail it in and half-ass because there's no repercussions.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's
and then it's so hard. Like, new people, it's so hard because you can tell them you want to, think this new person's going to raise the bar. A lot of times they'll meet the bar.
hmm,
So sometimes, like I've helped clients literally turn over their entire team so that they can have a high functioning team. Because people ask me all the time, like, how do I motivate my people? Well, the short answer is you can't. They have to be motivated. You can't motivate someone other than yourself.
right. I mean, financial motivation only goes a certain way. Right. And if you
Mhm.
overpay people and you're still, accepting mediocrity, you're not going to move them at all. So we have teams. What comes after teams? I think we're up to 3.
Okay. Yeah. So execution, just execute the shit out of it. I mean, it's execute, and also be able to, because there's parts of it where it's going to be really boring and monotonous, and s- consistency. Like just keep on executing, because there's going to be that part that is just not necessarily fun, especially if you're a creative entrepreneur. And just stay consistent. Like someone messaged me today, he had 11 placements this month, and I said,
Wow.
"What happened? Like, how did it was that for him was a spike? He's a solopreneur." And I said,
Yeah.
"What happened?" And he said, "Someone he's been bugging for 14 months finally needed him." So don't come to me and say, "I tried, like this isn't working." And I reached out. I'm like, "What do you mean you reached out?" They're like, "I sent them a LinkedIn message." I'm like, "How many?" They're like, "One." I'm like, "No, don't even talk to me. Like,
But
tell me up when."
that comes down to long-term relationships too. And I tell people all the time,
Yeah.
it's not one and done. You're not just reaching out to somebody one time. And you have to add value. I mean, clients get hit up, especially in this market with so many folks going out on their own. I mean, I have friends on the other side, like, Adam, I get at least 10, 15 messages a day from recruiters looking for business. Like, A, we're not hiring right now. And if I am, who am I going to work with? How do I choose who to work with? It's about relationships. Who have I worked with in the past? Who do I know? Who do I know is a constant performer? Who do I see, putting themselves out there and seeing their success elsewhere, right? Who stays in touch with me? Who's continuing to, stay that constant communication? And that's the difference. You can't be one and done. You can't spray and pray.
No, no. Yeah.
And what's number 5?
Yeah, so just being able to take it then where you want it to go. So it's if it's the so in my case it's the exit, right? And also like clarity on your numbers, like you mentioned. It's so common where entrepreneurs don't have clarity.
Good record keeping.
Visionaries a lot of times don't like to be vague. And so having clarity in your numbers and then knowing where you want to go with it.
Well Found, the team previously coined AngelList Talent, just came out with a revolutionary new product called Recruiter Cloud. Their goal with Recruiter Cloud was to eliminate all of the tedious tasks that bog down the recruiting process, causes major headaches, and slows hiring down. By blending AI with one-to-one human calibration, they created an effortless and effective sourcing experience. They also set you up with an expert sourcer to calibrate your search and help you find exactly the type of talent that you're looking for. Start with a simple one-on-one consultation, outline your must-haves, nice-to-haves, and any other custom specs, and they'll have great candidates booked on your calendar within days. All that's needed from you is to spend a few minutes each week reviewing a small batch of vetted and interested candidates. It's that easy. Plus, unlike a majority of other automated sourcing tools, WellFound's decade of industry expertise allows them to pull from proprietary, up-to-date candidate data, nothing scraped. And more quality data means more quality matches. Say goodbye to all the headaches that come with finding great talent and start sourcing smarter with Recruiter Cloud. Check it out at wellfound.com/recruiter-cloud. Thanks. So you talk a bit about kind of like premeditating, our vision and goal is to build a company to sell it. So what are some of those steps for someone building a recruiting practice to kind of lay that framework that, early on?
Yeah, well, you have to have recurring revenue. I mean, these are the things that make a business valuable. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at you decide, do I want to build this business to be a life. I mean, there's a lot of different definitions of lifestyle business, and I mean, they can be a
Right.
multi-million dollar business. But so, like, if you're doing only permanent placements, then your retirement plan is probably investing in real estate or something like that. Which is, that's an option if you don't want to build a staffing agency. That's one of your options. But in order to exit, you really do need to have a substantial exit. You need recurring revenue unless you're just like kind of like rolling up to another business or something like that. Or so that's one thing is that, and you also need to have a diversified client base. So you can't. I believe in an anchor client strategy, so that
Mm-hmm.
you have at least 3 anchors. That, and if everyone else goes away, that one client can sustain you.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of smiling too because, as I mentioned before, it's been a rough couple of years in my industry, and recruiting is cyclical. When things were good, there was 3 or 4 anchor clients, and it
Mhm.
maybe varied for how many open roles that they had, but we were their resource. We knew that
Mhm.
they were coming to us, and it was a mix between, RPO style and contingency. So you had the reoccurring revenue, and you had the contingency deals on top of it, and that was consistent. Problem now is obviously those companies aren't hiring, and they're laying people off, and obviously they don't need recruiters, especially outside recruiters. So you have to find other ways to diversify, how to go outside of your bullseye when things are rough. What else could
Yeah.
we do? We expanded into more tech in the last couple of years, taking on more technical tech roles and bringing in the
Mhm.
right resources and the right recruiters who could handle that. So you have to be able to kind of be malleable as a recruiter, as a business owner, and not always stay focused in your lane, especially if that market is slow. I mean, what advice would you give to me? Let's just say my industry is slow right now. I'm looking for other opportunities to expand. Like, how would you coach someone like myself right now to stay, head above water?
Yeah, I mean, and stay in it. I mean, that's one thing too. Like, this is, I love the downturns because this is really what
Mm,
it's the ones who can stick with it and are persistent and aren't are truly entrepreneurs. The next upturn is just is insane. Like, it's just you're showing your clients that you're steady, that you're here. So that's one thing, is just stick with it. Okay. One and then now when you're thinking about like diversifying, because you don't want to get too off track,
right.
right?
Because then you're kind of diluting.
And so, I mean, sometimes it makes sense. Like, sometimes you do need to, like, if the roles you're placing are obsolete, you need to pivot, right? But I mean, like, look, I in 2008, during the financial crisis, my biggest client was Countrywide Home Loans.
Mm.
And if you Google their CEO, he is literally called the face of the financial crisis. That was my biggest
Yeah.
client. Okay. And they went back, Countrywide went bankrupt,
Yep.
and they got taken over by Bank of America, who did not renew. They did not use us. They had
Yeah.
another agency. However, because we had recurring revenue, when you do staffing, you're literally doing something that your clients can't do for themselves. It's not legal. There's no such thing as corporate temps. So you're actually that your clients cannot so
Right.
easily say we're going to take this in house, because they can't. They just literally can't. So even though we lost all that business, we still had revenue there. We still had trailing revenue because we had placed employees there. So yes, it trickled off once, but we still had that up until the time we sold that business. And then so yeah, so that was and other things we did was we expanded geographically. So we expanded, so we started out in Southern California, and we had like LA, Orange County, few cities around there. Then we did the same. We kind of replicated that in Texas and Florida. So we had different hubs. So that was one way that we looked at diversification.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
also know, let me just say, also just know it's there are people doing a lot of business right now. So that's like sitting in my shoes. And I know you talk to a lot of different recruiters, like sitting in my shoes and like people having confidential conversations with me. There are a lot of people who are doing well. It's a $218 billion
yep.
industry in the
Yep.
US. There's still a lot of opportunity. We only need a tiny slice of that.
That's all we need, and you got to find those opportunities. So where are those warm leads hanging out, right? Like, what are some of these rocks? I mean, we're gonna get real. I don't want to give away all the secrets here. I almost want to cut, listen to what you have to say here, and then cut it from the episode and keep it for myself.
The warm leads. This is so interesting because so many people are really resistant to this, and they'll say to me, "We don't have any warm leads," and I'm like, "Dude, you've been doing this for 12 years, and like it's literally the people and staying connected." Okay, this is one of my favorite ways. We were talking about old school ways to get clients. This is one of my favorite absolute ways. Is whenever I have a candidate who is in like a hiring manager can be in that capacity,
Mm-hmm.
when if I've sent them out on interviews and they accept an offer from a different agency, I am the one that gets that business. Like I know, because I don't have that business because it's through another agency. So I'm the one taking them out to lunch. I'm calling them. I'm congratulating them on their new job, even though I did not place them. I'm getting their business, and I've gotten like millions of dollars out of using that strategy.
So let's break that down. So say you're
Mhm.
trying to place a candidate, and they take an offer, and they're using another agency. You go out there, and then and if they're in a position to be hiring in their new company, you're
Mhm.
saying, congratulations, let me take you out to lunch. And now you're taking that relationship, and you're going to be their agency when they need to hire.
That's correct.
See, that's an
Yes.
old school tactic of relationships. And what does that
Yes.
cost you? $100 for lunch, right? Like that investment into that, if that, and you're spending time with them, you're building a real life relationship or rapport. And
Mhm.
it's fascinating. I want to go back to something interesting. And you talked about the right team. And I think that's critical too. Like, how does somebody go about and hire the right recruiter? Like, what are those questions? I mean, recruiting recruiters. I mean, we
Mhm.
should know what to ask in theory, but many don't.
Well, I heard years ago that we're the worst at recruiting for ourselves because we're so used to selling people.
Yeah.
Like we're so used to seeing the positive and telling people why they will work. So we're generally not great at it. But okay, so things I like to do. One is take is systematize the interview process. The
Hmm.
first call I always have is no more than 10 to 15 minutes. It's pre-qualifying questions, so that way I know exactly what I'm going to ask. I tell them what to expect. I always treat it to like this early stage. Every single touch, you're starting to train them from your
Hmm.
job description, from your posting. You're training them who you are, what your core values are, what their mission's going to be in your company. So you're setting them up already, like from the beginning, right? Like inviting them into the drama of your business and building your business. And then when you talk to them, so you have to, well, one thing I think I'm always aware. I know a lot of people hate it when I say this, but I really think just a complete different attitude of agency recruiters and in-house. I've never been in-house, but you want to know what their goals are. Like agency recruiting is entrepreneurial. It could be a shit show,
Yeah,
you know.
you're running a full desk. You're responsible for delivery and business development. That is the definition of entrepreneurship.
Mhm. Yes, yeah, and it's stressful, you know. And if you're in, so I believe you have to. I look for people who are either motivated by money, and if they're not, they have to explain why.
Yeah,
So
well, are you
I
independently wealthy and just love recruiting? Come on, how many people really do that? Let's keep it real here, Diane.
and sometimes though, you either want the people that are motivated by money or the people pleasers, or like the kids who always had to have 100% on the test. Like,
Mm.
so those are like they just want to do a good job because they're motivated by that. So it can be either of those. Like, those are things, and they have to have a sense of urgency.
I mean, that's it. Sense of urgency. I mean, I think that's a core difference between internal and external recruiters. And there was a post yesterday on LinkedIn. This dude was posting about, and he was defending internal recruiters. And I said, listen, of course there are the outliers in internal agency recruiting that are just rock stars that get it, and there's a different skill set. But when it comes down to urgency, generally speaking, you don't have that drive unless you're financially motivated. And I'm just
Mhm.
being straight up with that, right? Like when
Yeah.
your paycheck depends on you filling a role with a great qualified candidate as quickly as possible for the highest salary, it's a different ball game.
Yes, yes, and you have to be excited about it. And I mean, I've seen agencies hire commission-based recruiters though who are happy with their base, and so
What is
they
that?
don't really.
But you're not hitting the draw. You're not like that's not profitable. Get the hell out.
Exactly. Yes, yes. Thank you. Knowing how to fire people quickly. Thank you. Yes.
I mean, but let's talk about that for a little bit too, because I
Mhm.
had an interesting run when I first got into my recruiting, and I pivoted into recruiting at 35. So I had 15 years in industry and working in
Mhm.
marketing, and then I became a recruiter for marketing and media, and
Uh-huh.
I came out of the gate hot. I came out of the gate swinging, and like my first 9 months was really strong, and then I made a fatal rookie mistake that I thought I could sit back and take my foot off the gas when it came to business development, and I learned the lesson the hard way. And in my first year,
Mhm.
I had 3 goose eggs in a row. I had 3 months of deals falling through, nothing. Things were, but I learned the hard lesson that it was my fault because I took my foot off
Mhm.
the gas,
Yes.
right? And if
Yes.
and then I recalibrated, I readjusted, and I got back into the swing of it. Like you have to always be going. There is
But
no
even
breaks.
what you just said, Adam, though, that my key takeaway on what you just said is that you took ownership and you looked at what you did and how you could do it differently, because that's how you can tell if it's going to be a solid recruiter, or if you have the right person in the right seat. It's the person who's saying, how can I do this differently, and not looking at only the external circumstances, but like, how can I take this, and what did I do wrong, and what can I change.
I mean, it's a tough one too. There's a lot of ego that goes into recruiting too, right? There's a lot of that which you have to take out of it and really look at self awareness and self assessment and say, okay, what did I do wrong here? What can I do better? Now,
Hmm.
unlike any other job, there are X factors in our business that are out of our control. I mean, we all have our crazy stories. I mean, I have, we could tell war stories all day long of why deals fall through at the last minute. I mean, I have crazy
Hmm.
stories of a company where an ex employee came in and stole $3 million, and I had a candidate in the final round, and they had to pause the search, and it was over. Crazy stories of I had one candidate that was ready to accept the chief creative officer role, and then her husband, who works for Microsoft, her soon-to-be husband, engaged her the day before, and they were moving far away back before remote
Hmm.
work. Like we all have those
Hmm.
crazy stories, but if you in your heart know you did everything you could, and the only reason that deal did not fall through is because of the human X factor, then you could say you did a good job. Shake it
Yes.
off, right? And I also learned early
Mhm.
on that deals are going to fall through, and you need to shake it off. Be upset for that day. Do
Yeah.
what you need to do to get that frustration. But the next day you wake up, that deal is gone. It's
Yes.
over. Move
Yeah.
on, right?
That's the job, right? It's the job. And like, when recruiters say, well, this role is hard. Well, yeah, they're all hard. That's why we get paid. That's why they hire us.
So I think a lot of people also don't understand the difference. You built your empire on temp staffing, but what it's a different ballgame. It's a different,
Mhm.
like how do you break that down to folks out there who may not understand? Because a lot of people when I say I'm recruiting, they're like, oh, you just charge 20-30% of the salary. I go, well, there's a lot of models within recruiting. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat
Yeah.
here. Break it down for us, please.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I was at a tech agency called Hire Clout in LA. Hired me about 5 years ago, and to help them build out their contracting division. But they also had me work a desk in a permanent
Mm.
placement tech. I'd never done tech or perm. It's crazy, but I came in and I was one of the top sellers. So I was like really proud of that. And it was fun, and it was such a good experience, rounding out my experience. And now I understand direct hire. But one thing that's interesting to me is that teaching people from permanent how to do contracting, it's sort of like this, I don't know, there's this minds like this like barrier, because I think it's just unclear how it works. And when I did, like, we literally did complicate it. I mean, looking back, like, I would have done things totally differently. But I mean, you get an employer of record who doesn't, they charge about
Mm.
20%. They can fund your payroll as well.
So you're taking all that liability off. You're not going to have to payroll these contractors, and you're just taking the margin, right?
Correct. Some of them even have no recourse, meaning that if the client doesn't pay, then you're not
So they're
out. You
taking
just
the
don't take
liability
profit. Yeah,
for
most of them.
that percent.
Yeah, most of them you do have to take liability, but that's another thing that I do. Like, I'm constantly interviewing and meeting different, like, because I'm obsessed with helping helping people do this and create recurring revenue. So and some of them have, like, some of them do industrial, some of them don't, some of them, they have different
Yep.
strengths, but it's not that. I think what one people think people really don't understand is it's this often it's the same contacts. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's the same people, right? Because it's a lot easier to get to retain business than to get new business. We all know this,
Mm-hmm. Of course.
and it's often the same people that are doing the temp buying, and it's just asking the questions, and people get so, like, caught up in the whole, like, I don't know, perfectionism, and like, well, what do I say? Just ask them. Just
Ask for
find
the
out.
business.
Right, and ask where
Who are
are
you
they
guys
using
using?
contractors?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
where?
and are they doing a good job? Are you happy with them?
Yes,
It's
yes.
it's not it's not that complicated. So, Dan, you've been there, you've done that, you've
Mhm.
gone back to working for another agency, you've consulted, you're helping people now. What's next at this season of your life?
So I love what I'm doing. So when I've always wanted to have a coaching business. I did it, like, as a volunteer for years, and I really knit, like, I was coaching all different kinds of founders, tech founders, everything, and I started niching into recruiting.
Hmm.
My coach was like, "Why are you not coaching recruiting
I mean,
recruiting
it's your
at
area of
GEO?" And I'm
expertise,
like,
right?
yeah, let's try that. So what I am doing is I am working on making it accessible, so you do not have to pay $12,000 to get coaching. Like, with the 6-month package,
And I
I'm
think
kind
that's a barrier too, but I also think people have to invest into their education and success, right?
100%, 100%. So I want to make it, yes, there has to be an investment, but also accessible. So I have different levels. So I do have executive coaching clients where they do pay me a lot of money. It's
Hmm.
one-on-one. I offer asynchronous support too. Like, I'm basically always there, like, answering questions, providing
Hmm.
support. And then I have a group, and I love that too. And that's amazing because there's different founders from all over who are chatting, and it's a moderated conversation. And that now I'm also creating products. So I'm about to launch, like, super affordable
There you
digital,
go.
like, how to do temp staffing, and different products there that are just, like, easy, and here's how you do it. Done.
That's fantastic. What's keeping you up these days?
Um, I sleep really well.
There we go. I love that answer too. No, but let's talk about, like, what are some of the things you see maybe in the market or the economy? What are some what are the? 'Cause let me ask you this: do you think AI is gonna take over recruiting as we know it?
No, and then, you mentioned that I've been in this business since before the pretty much before the internet, and I mean, this has been a conversation through the last 30 years that I've been in it.
Tech, tech, tech.
Yeah, so it's just, I think, just using the tools. I mean, like, AI is, like, freaky. I mean, it can be amazing and helpful, and it can also be freaky and scary. So, like, I try to just keep focusing on the things I can control. I just, it's like there's so many uncontrollables. Look at how, I'll look. Okay, so things that do, like, sort of, if keep me up, I guess, like, keep
Hmm.
me freaked out in the middle of the day, I'll say. So I'm obsessed with sleep. I'm obsessed with getting 8 hours every night. But I mean, I look at, like, how can I, now that I'm coaching and consulting, I'm always looking at that. Like, how can I make it better? What do people want to learn from me? Like,
Right.
that's not out there, because there's so many good coaches out there. Have relationships with a lot of them. Like, how can I do this and how can I provide this value? And and help entrepreneurs and founders. And sometimes it's just like little things that you just like seeing a blind spot.
Well, that's a big thing about coaching too, right? And I learned that early on when I invested in coaching for myself, as someone to look down in the 30,000 foot view. And we, as entrepreneurs, we have our blinders on. We have our
Yes.
hearts, and that's why it's critical. So then let's bring it home here. This has been a fantastic conversation. I definitely want everyone to check out DianePrince.co/podcast. Check out what she's building there. We're going to link it up in the show notes. But Diane, what is personally, what is that single greatest piece of advice that you've received that you take action on every day? It could be a mantra,
Oh
something you just
gosh.
really like, first thing when you wake up out of the bed in the morning, you say to yourself, this is how I'm going to start my day. This is what I'm going to repeat in my
Oh
head.
gosh. Okay. Well, the first thing I meditate in the morning. So I actually like kind of try to stay
Hmm.
open to what's going to happen. One thing I will say is that if I'm so for example, if I don't know where my next client's coming from, so you asked that you had
Yeah.
asked like, what do you do in these times? So I frame it in a way that I get curious. So like if I was goose egging for a couple of months, or like I look at it like I would ask, and I mean it's like woo woo whatever, like universe or manifestation, but instead of saying like, well, this isn't working, whatever, I'll say, I wonder, I wonder if I find myself stressing, I wonder how I'm going to solve this. Or I'll say like, I wonder where my next client's going to come from. Or I wonder what my next, like what that revenue stream will look like. I wonder how that's going to look. And then things tend to kind of every single time, pretty much things come into place when I take
I
that
like that. I
attitude.
like that mindset. And Diane, last but not least, you look back on your life, the ups and downs, the struggles, the
Hmm.
accomplishments, the success, the failures, but there's always been that beacon, that compass. Diane Prince, what is your compass? What is your North Star in life?
My why is personal freedom. And I think that's why I've always been driven by that, by starting my own business. And, I mean, all the decisions I've made pretty much have led to that. And now it's pretty amazing at where I'm at, because I'll realize, because sometimes I'll be unsatisfied with where I'm at or whatever. And then I'll just all of a sudden remember, wait, like this is what I'm experiencing now. This is personal freedom.
Personal freedom. I could attest to that. And thank you for sharing, right? Like there's moments when, I mean, I think about it all the time. I'm like, could I go back to a full-time job? Could I go back to working for somebody else? And once you taste this and you taste the highs and you know what the lows are and you know how to manage it and you bounce back from them multiple times, you know you're
Hmm.
built for this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you could,
What's your North Star? Can I ask? Can I throw it back
yeah,
on
I
you?
mean, it's a very good question. I mean, it's so cliche, but it really is setting the right example for my children.
Mm,
My legacy is really going to be leaving this earth a better place than I found it. And for me, that's my kids. And that's by leading, for example, and them seeing their
yes.
dad at their best. And even when they see their dad at the worst, how he comes back from that and how he responds. And that's something I'm really focused on these days.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
12 and 6. I named my
Okay.
company after my 12-year-old. These are our initials right here. Nina Harrison
Oh,
Posner,
that's
NHP Talent Group.
amazing.
So my North Star sits over my shoulder all day long.
I love it.
That's right.
When my kids are now in their young adults, and when their friends will say like, when their friends say stuff, they're like, we, some of their friends follow me, or they've said like, it's just getting when my kids get compliments from their friends on their mom, like that's pretty cool.
I'll tell you one thing. My kids love the podcast. They love the podcast. My daughter's been on a number of times. My 6-year-old son's going to come on for the first time this year. So I've been doing that for 5 years with her, and that's our time capsule together. We do an annual show
Uh-huh.
at the end of every year, like a wrap up show. And I've
Oh,
seen that over 4 years where she couldn't get over the desk, and now she's like, she's growing there. But Dan, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Again, I want everyone to check out DianePrince.co/the podcast. We'll link it up in the comments. Where else could folks follow you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a message and let me know. I'm always looking for ways to provide value. So, any questions, follow my content. I share content every day on LinkedIn, every weekday on LinkedIn, on how to build a successful recruiting agency. And I answer. So, one way to get help from me for free is ask me, you can DM me a
Just
question.
engage.
Yes,
Diane is
yes.
great. Diane is fantastic. Diane, I want to
Thanks,
thank you so
Adam.
much for joining us here. And everyone listening at home, I hope you gained a ton of value from this conversation. You know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on all the social media channels at NHP Talent on Insta. We're trying to blow that up. YouTube /the podcast. Remember, Be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.